Hey, welcome. So, have you ever picked up a copy of Don Quixote, felt how thick it is, and just thought, yeah, maybe later? If that's you, then you're in the right place. We're going to break down Miguel de Cervantes' huge masterpiece into a simple guide to what is honestly one of the wildest and most important stories ever written.
Okay, let's just start with this question. Imagine you've spent your entire life just binge-reading epic fantasy. You know, all the stories about knights, dragons, and saving the day. What if, one day, you decided those stories weren't just fiction, but they were actually your destiny? Well, that's the wonderfully bonkers idea that kicks this whole book off.
So this is where our story starts. We're introduced to a Spanish nobleman who is so completely obsessed with these old-school adventure stories that he decides the world needs a hero, just like in his books. And, well, who better to be that hero than himself?
And he goes all in. I mean, he digs up some rusty, ancient armor, he gives his beat-up old horse a heroic name, Rocinante, and he renames himself Don Quixote of La Mancha. It's like the books have totally rewired his brain. He's not just reading about adventures anymore, he actually believes he is living them. His imagination is so strong, it just completely overwrites reality.
And here's the thing, everyone around him knows exactly what they think is to blame. After his first, let's say, disastrous adventure, his housekeeper doesn't blame bad luck. Nope. As you can see here, she's straight up cursing the books. And this is a huge theme in the story. The people in his life see his library as the root of all his problems.
Now, you'd probably think the author who created such an unforgettable character would be super proud of him, right? Well, the story of the author, Miguel de Cervantes, is almost as surprising as the one he wrote.
This is honestly one of the biggest ironies in all of literature. Cervantes' real dream wasn't writing novels at all. He wanted to be a famous playwright. He saw himself as a serious artist writing these grand, important tragedies. To him, Don Quixote was kind of just a side hustle, just an amusing book to make a little money and entertain folks.
Yeah, he was so detached from the work that would make him famous forever that he called himself a stepfather to the book, not even a father. When new editions came out with typos and mistakes, he just shrugged, didn't bother to fix them. You know, some people think that casual attitude is actually why the book feels so free and wild. He wasn't trying to write some stuffy masterpiece, he was just having fun with it. But here's the crucial thing. Don Quixote doesn't ride alone on his quest. The absolute heart and soul of this story is the relationship he has with a local farmer he talks into becoming his squire.
So, meet Sancho Panza. He is Don Quixote's complete opposite in every single way. Quixote is tall, skinny, lost in his ideals, and talks like he's in a play. Sancho is short, stout, super practical, and is basically just in it for the free meals and the island he was promised as a reward. This clash between the dreamer and the realist, that's where all the best humor and, honestly, the heart of the book comes from.
But don't make the mistake of thinking Sancho is just the comic relief. As Don Quixote himself points out here, you can never quite tell if Sancho is a total fool or secretly a genius. He says all these silly old proverbs, but they're often packed with real-world wisdom that his so-called noble master completely misses. He's the perfect anchor, keeping the story tied to reality, even while Don Quixote is trying to fly off into Fantasyland.
So, what actually happens on their journey? Well, the basic plot is just Don Quixote and Sancho Panza wandering around Spain, with Quixote's nightly fantasies constantly, and I mean constantly, smashing right into the hard, boring, ordinary world.
And most of his misadventures follow this predictable and absolutely hilarious formula. First, he sees something totally normal, like a windmill. Then, his imagination turns it into something epic, like a ferocious giant. He heroically charges in, gets completely wrecked, and then, and this is the best part, he confidently blames it all on evil sorcerers who must have changed the giants back into windmills just to mess with him. It's never his fault.
This just shows you how unbreakable his fantasy world is. See, every knight needs a lady to fight for, so he picks a local farm girl he barely knows and calls her the beautiful Dulcinea. But when Sancho just points to a random peasant girl, Quixote doesn't for a second think he might be wrong. Oh no. He decides that evil enchanters must have turned his perfect princess into this girl who, he complains, smells like raw garlic. He will believe anything before admitting he made a mistake.
Okay, so this sounds like a funny, maybe kind of repetitive story. So why are we still reading it in school 400 years later? What's the big deal?
Well, first off, it was a massive runaway hit right from the start. We're talking 30,000 copies printed while Cervantes was still alive. In an age before modern printing, That number is just staggering. It was the blockbuster movie of its day, a total viral sensation. And it wasn't just a bestseller in Spain, it went global and fast. As this quote from an introduction to the book points out, other than the Bible, pretty much no other book had been so widely translated and read. It was a true cultural phenomenon all across Europe. But its real, lasting legacy is how it completely changed literature forever. A lot of experts call it the very first modern novel, because it was one of the first stories to really get deep inside its characters' heads. It explores their thoughts, their feelings, their contradictions. It's not just about what happens to them, it's about who they are. And that focus on character psychology, it basically laid the groundwork for almost every novel that's been written since.
And that kind of brings us to the final big idea. Sure, Don Quixote is mad, but there's something kind of noble, maybe even heroic in his madness, isn't there? He holds on to his ideals, things like justice and romance and honor, in a world that's often pretty cynical. And it makes you wonder, in our own lives, when should we be a realist, like Sancho Panza, and when is it worth it to be a little bit quixotic, to chase after an ideal that maybe no one else can see but you?